Bingley.
Here.
Vice Chair Silverford.
Here.
Diane Foster. Here. Sean Garland.
Here.
Dave McCart. Absent. Rich Miller. Absent. Amy Miller-Jouvet.
Here.
And Chris West is absent.
I do not have the minutes.
Oh.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Motion to approve the minutes as well.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes approved. The business section, recreational marijuana open house recap. Can you talk about that? Who was there? You were there.
Yeah, I
You
was
guys
there.
were down there. And talk about what you.
Yeah, it was a good session. Michelle Miller had all of the documentation needed for all of us to have a really good discussion. She had a map of the city and outlined currently where dispensaries are dispensaries, right? They're called dispensaries if they're recreational marijuana?
No,
No, just
That's
recreational
medical
marijuana facilities.
dispensaries and recreational, they just are calling retail outlets, for lack of a better term, I think.
Okay, so she had a map that outlined where retail facilities could not be based on the current state regulations, and then had some guiding discussion questions for us all to answer, and then took feedback from the group at the end of the session.
No decisions were actually made, but there was a lot of discussion. And I thought it was really helpful to have, I believe her name was Sherry?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Sherry was there to help explain several aspects that I hadn't even thought about. I mean, I had no idea that mass quantities of marijuana has an odor with it, didn't even occur to me.
I think that was the interesting thing, and what Sherry brought a lot of information to was that we're talking about 5 different processes. You know, it's not just a retail shop, it's the producers, it's the research labs and stuff. And so she had a lot of background on that, which I thought was very helpful. And I was the same way with you when I originally went into the thinking of, here's the state guidelines, what restrictions would you put above and beyond that? I initially hadn't gone in with any more restrictions than what the state had offered, but I happened to be sitting at the table with Sherry, and she told us about the odor, the waste product that comes by, and based on her recommendation of probably you want to keep that out of the residential area, that I was kind of brought over to that side of maybe adding that to an additional restriction. But like you said, we didn't actually come to any decisions. Michelle gathered all the information from the groups, and we had a great group. I mean, a very diverse group. We had quite a few council members, quite a few planning commission members. Police were represented as well, and quite a few citizens. I don't know, was it maybe 30 to 35 people total, maybe?
Total there?
So,
I
yeah.
think the sentiment that I had heard from multiple tables was that they wish there was more information about the process, and like the odor, people didn't really recognize that there was a serious odor and a lot of waste associated with the production of marijuana, and so there was a lot of discussion about we wish we would have known more about the process in order to make more informed decisions.
It was really nice to have her there to be able to give us some of that information. And it would be helpful if we could find a way to disseminate that further, so that more people could understand it a little bit better. But that's been the issue all along. Now, there's a survey that's still online, I believe, right, through the end of this month?
Yeah. She said through the end of this month.
Okay.
Through the end of this month, asking for the community's
Through
input.
the planning commission.
Right. So, if we could just continue to remind people that, this is your community and this is your chance to voice your opinion, that get as many opinions in as we can and try to help make this process. And one of the interesting things that I kept having to go back to and remind myself of is recreational marijuana is legal in the town. It's a matter of whether or not we are going to allow it to be sold in the town. And so all of this work that the planning commission is doing right now is in preparation for the vote in which the community will say whether or not we are going to allow recreational marijuana to be sold in the city of Sherwood. So that if it is voted down and the town says no recreational marijuana will be sold here, then we don't need all of these rules. But what we're doing now is trying to be proactive so that we have an idea of what we want to do in place if the vote is that we should allow recreational marijuana to be sold. Any other thoughts or comments?
Well, I just had a question now. Are we, as the Police Advisory Board, kind of being asked or tasked to do what we did similarly with the medical marijuana dispensaries as far as give our input to the Planning Commission to the City Council, or is this more falling on the Planning Commission for this one?
Well, I will answer that the best I can, but I would also tell the board that if you haven't already noticed, we also have a member of the Planning Commission here, Mr. Pearson, so he may want to jump in on that. My understanding is, yes, is that you should at least be thinking that you will have that opportunity to provide that input in a very similar process. So whatever that means to you in terms of repeating some of the information gathering, research, so on that you did on the topic of the medical dispensaries, it would probably be useful to do that, at the very least, so that you are prepared to offer that input if you are asked, so.
And I will tell you that when we were doing medical marijuana, we listened to your input, and we tried to incorporate as much of the positive suggestions that you had for us in the final result. In fact, the way it came out is based on the input that you gave us. The state guidelines are simply a floor. Okay, this is, you have to do this, but we can do more. And as we were pointing out, we did a lot more than the minimum state guidelines, which is why we wound up with one only, and where it was located, and it was located in the industrial zone, not in any commercial zone, absolutely nowhere near any residential zone, period. No parks, no schools, none of that. So we appreciated, I can only speak for myself on this point, appreciated your attending that open house. And we want to continue to solicit your input because, as I said, the last time we incorporated it, we want to incorporate it again this time. The sentiment, prevailing sentiment was that we were so restrictive with the medical marijuana facility that we're going to probably want to continue that with the recreational marijuana. And if we retain those restrictions, we're going to be pretty much limited to one. Up until recently, we were operating under a rule that medical marijuana and recreational marijuana could not be sold out of the same facility. Josh Soper, the city attorney at our meeting, commented that once again the state changed the rule, and now medical and recreational can be sold out of the same facility. Which means that if we want, we can make sure that we're only gonna have one building and one store. And I haven't talked to the lady, but word has come back to me that she's perfectly willing to expand her business to include marijuana. Let me also quickly remind you that consumption of the product is prohibited in these stores, either medical or recreational. You can only buy the product. You have to take it home and use it there. The recreational marijuana brought additional factors that medical didn't have. We have growers, which we have for both. We had processors, which are people who take the plant and then turn it into what you get. And then we have wholesalers. Okay, so people take, the processors sell to the wholesalers. The wholesalers then sell to the retailers. So those are 4 right there. And the 5th area is a lab, because interestingly enough, there have to be purity concerns about the product. We want to make sure there's no pesticides or anything in the product. We don't want to be poisoning our consumers. So those are the 5 different businesses that are incorporated under the recreational rule that weren't necessarily involved in the medical. Each one of those had to be determined where you want to put them. Okay. Up until, so we're not just looking at the store where it's sold, we're looking at all these other factors. Where do you want those? Where do you want to limit those? We need to hear from you in terms of where you want to limit those. I think the consensus was pretty obvious that we didn't want it in residential. We don't want any of this in residential. We don't want it near schools, we don't want it near churches, we don't want it near parks, we don't want it near any of that stuff. So that's clear. But we want this to be your input, and this is ultimately your decision. And all we are doing is going to be recommending these positions to the city council, who has the ultimate authority as to what the regulations will be. This is all based on the assumption that the citizens of Sherwood will not prohibit the sale of recreational marijuana because it would be, frankly, costly to the city to do that. We don't get any tax kickback for the medical, but we do get it for recreational. Recreational marijuana is legal in this state. You can consume it at home. Where you buy it is the only question. We already will have a store that sells marijuana medical. As the chief and you pointed out to us, this store is what an insurance company would call an attractive nuisance. This store is going to be a magnet for thieves, because marijuana is a cash business. And you can't deposit drug money in federal banks. You can't use credit cards to buy it. It's federal banks. It's a cash business. There's going to be a lot of cash in this place, always. It's going to be a major problem for the police department. The state recognizes this and giving us, if we allow it sold here, money back through taxes. If we don't, we still have those problems that we still have to pay for. Okay? So, this is my, as I said many a time, I'm not a marijuana user, I never will be a marijuana user. My problem is what I'd like to see the fast food restaurants close, but other than that, that's my addiction.
So,
But this is the issue that we really need you to send back to the community. The cost of policing is going to be there, one way or the other, how the vote goes.
So it's really important that we get the community to take notice and
To take notice,
give us
to be aware that this would be a costly decision.
but I guess I have a question, and Linda or Tom might know, clarifying on the vote that's coming up, the actual ballot in November, that can't be parsed out, right, to not allow sales, but we can allow producers, wholesalers, it's all or nothing, right?
Not how it's currently written.
Okay.
It's all or nothing, the way it's written.
Thank you.
Michelle let me take home a map and some of her documentation, so everyone that's been coming in to my house, I've been showing them back, they're like, okay, we get it, but, I'm guessing that if there are still some that she has, she'd be willing to share them. And they're also online.
Probably on.
Yeah, I think they are online, yeah. Any other thoughts or comments?
I know it was a good meeting, it was a good start, and I know that there was some sentiment from the people in attendance that we'd like to have some more, or some, just open house things. I think Michelle sounded like she was somewhat open to that idea. So I'd like to certainly see some more, community discussion. I mean, just from our small discussion that we had with that small group, there were a lot of people that came out of there with a lot more information than we walked in with, which is what we need more of, and I'm not saying which way or the other I'm, leaning on this, but I think getting the information out there to some people is very important, because there's a lot of people that really don't know the whole scope of what's going on.
What else do you think? Okay. Move on. Staffing study discussion?
So, Madam Chair, I invited Tom again, just this morning, officially, as a.
Thank you for joining us.
It is on my calendar.
Did you ask Mr. Pesselmer if he was Irish before you asked him?
No. So, I will defer to Tom and,
Well, I don't really have a whole lot for you other than just, I think what you must know, but I'll just kind of give you an update of where things are at. Certainly the study, at least the final draft of the study, has been completed and released. I think you probably all hopefully have a chance to look at least, it's over 100 pages, so there's a lot of material to go through, but it's not that long of a read either, so. So that's certainly out there. Greg Matthews from Matrix came and did about an hour and a half work session with council on Tuesday to really give them the opportunity to ask questions about what was in there and maybe what wasn't in there, and just get some good basic information. So I got the feeling from that meeting that I think that at least council had a good opportunity to understand a lot more about what the report had and what the recommendations were. So from here, Greg got a couple of things that council wanted to see and some things that he thought should be added, and that's going to turn into the final report then. And I think he's told me he's probably have that done early next week. So that then will be the final report. It'll be very similar to this report with just a little bit more information in a couple of areas. And really then it moves on to the implementation, portion of the project, which is, as far as I know, doesn't include me. At least I haven't heard so yet. But that really does include, it's council, certainly the police department. There's some areas in the report that are, could be implemented inside the police department. Those are things that want to be implemented. So I'm sure the city manager will play a role in that. And of course, if there's budgetary items, but maybe we'll consider those as well. So I don't really know for sure exactly where that's going. I think the report's just fresh out, so there really probably hasn't been a whole lot of conversation about that. I don't know whether you guys will have a role in that or not. That'll really be up to council to decide whether that's something that they want to assign to this board. So I guess that's just an update. That's certainly if you guys have questions.
So the final report, when it comes out, will that also be online for?
Yeah, we'll
communities?
replace the report that's currently there with the final report, just to make sure that it's there. I don't, and we'll probably just say, what got changed, because I think he's only planning on changing one section and then adding a graph, so.
The scatter graph?
Yeah, it's got.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. And at the moment, I have not heard one way or the other if the council wants the advisory board to have a role. Is it too soon to know?
Yeah, I don't think they've had those conversations. I don't know if I'll speak for you, but,
Well, we haven't discussed it as a council body, but we just got the report last Friday, and it's a lot to absorb. It's 110 pages.
113.
Okay. So you may or may not have all had an opportunity to read it. I mean, it takes some time to absorb, but I'm sure in the other ways that we've asked for your feedback as an advisory board to take a look at it, and if there are questions, you could certainly talk to Tom or talk to the chief. And, you know, there's some terminology in there that Greg uses that, you know, would be new to us if we were to implement. Sarah is the one investigative tool that he, you know, and so there's a lot to absorb. And I haven't even talked to Chief Growth about it yet. Haven't really had the chance to sit down and talk to him about it, so. But, you know, it was certainly comprehensive. And, given Mr. Matthews' background, I certainly, appreciate having a third party come in who really knows what it's like to be in law enforcement. And, so again, we're all still absorbing it, but in general, I think there were a lot of, angles and systems that he looked at, that will help people understand, you know, how the police department works and the philosophy of patrol and traffic. And, you know, I thought a lot of the comments from the citizens were very interesting. So, and if you haven't done a ride-along yet, again, highly encourage you to do that, to get an understanding of what it's like to sit in that seat, even in Sherwood.
So I know the work session is actually on YouTube. I saw that, up there
Mhm.
again, so if anyone, I think you two were in attendance, or you guys were all there, okay? I wasn't. So I, yeah, saw some of it today, so in case anyone else didn't have a chance to attend.
I should let you all know that I was at the session, and I did approach and make a comment to the council because the information that came out, I mean, I think that his primary, of the recommendations that he made, he said if we were going to make any changes, that the one that he would put up at the top level would be to add an SRO, which is what tracked with what we had
So some
heard.
comments then.
Right, so I went up and I commented and I let the council know that it did track with what information we had obtained. And I also mentioned the drugs in the park that we heard about and the traffic issues throughout the community as being the three big
And
things.
it seems like a lot of the survey comments that came back from the citizens matched up pretty well with the personal feedback that we got as well, so.
The one thing is, there was a question about how our school district compares with others around us, and there was a little brief discussion, but unfortunately, I didn't feel like there was enough information shared at that point, that we have even talked about as far as numbers and enrollment and how we compared it to Tualatin and others like us. So that would be good information, I believe, for the council to have, because Tualatin is very similar in enrollment to us, and they have 3, yeah. And we were talking about others, so we had that discussion, and there are questions from the council about that. So I think that
Comparison.
information would be good as a follow-up, because,
You have that, we talked about it.
yeah, and we talked about.
Yeah,
4 months ago?
And unfortunately, I did not have the information with me,
Yeah.
because I did mention, I know it's out there, and I know that our ratio is bigger than, you know, we're 1 to 5,000, and I didn't say what the others were because I just didn't remember. But I do know the information's out there, and I did let them know that it's there. So hopefully that will come out. But yes, our research, our community contacts have told us that they'd like to see another SRO as well. Once they understood what our ratio was and what our officer could do, there's unfortunately not a lot of people know. You know, they don't know what our police department does or doesn't do or can or can't do, and so that was half the battle, was sitting there and talking to people first and then getting their thoughts on the information we were giving them.
And how we
You know.
compared to neighboring communities, that was really important.
We've got it printed out.
This is a report right here, it's 113 pages. I did not double size it, because I go through and I make marks on it, and I find it easier to have just single pages. But being in the audience and hearing the report, I thought it was very comprehensive. I thought that, Matthew was his name?
Right.
Matthews did a really good job of summarizing the report down into an hour and a half. The slides that he showed were good. I think that in any report, whenever you're doing a report of an organization, be it a police organization, a corporation, whomever, to me, one of the most important parts of the morale of your employees. And I found that that section in here about where they went in and they kind of diced and sliced the results of the survey of all the employees, patrol staff, everybody, was extremely interesting, and I would think that there are sections in there that one would want to go back and take a good hard look at. The guts of this is probably in about the first 30 pages. The rest really takes more detail, more depth into what they found. But I think it's an excellent report. I think there's certainly a lot of stuff in there to take a good hard look at when you get the final report. And thought the recommendations were good. So anyway, I think it was money well spent. And I thought your question went at the very end where he said you're getting the bang for the buck here in Sherwood.
Those were his words.
Yeah, it was very good. Good question, and that's the kind of response we like to hear, at least I like to hear.
I apologize if I missed this, but is there going to be a more digestible copy for the community to read, or at least like high-level bullet points for the community to read?
That's what the executive summary is, essentially.
That's, okay.
The entire report is online.
Oh, I know, but if I were just a regular community member, I'd wanna know maybe the 5 or 6 high-level bullet point details. And I know, I saw on Facebook that, I think someone released a point today on Facebook about 92 or 9, whatever the percentage was of citizens feel safe in Sherwood. I think
Yeah.
that's really
Oh.
helpful to help educate people what the report really said. 'Cause if I were a community member, I wouldn't look through this, especially if I didn't understand what an executive summary was and all.
Well, I mean, I'd have to think
So-
about it, but we certainly could release the executive summary separately.
Yeah.
But I have kind of double-minded on that, just because I think the executive summary is important, but I think there's also additional information in the report that supports that is important, and I don't want people just to read that and think that they've really understood what the report's trying to say.
My guess is that people would do that anyways, is what I'm trying to say. So if they were really interested, they probably would just read the first few pages and miss everything else anyways. And I think that we miss the opportunity of people wanting to even dive in and look at the first few pages because of how long it is. So it's just a suggestion.
You can look at this in about 2 hours max, maybe more like an hour and a half, and go through it in fairly good depth.
What was that? Took me way longer
I
than
think
an hour.
Mr. Silverford reads faster than I do.
Yeah, no, I
It took me a lot longer than an hour and a half.
Me too.
But,
Well, I think one of the last comment I have on it is, I think one of the things about the report isn't what's in there, it's what's not in there, and I think that kind of came out a little bit at the council questions. When Matrix is doing these, they're taking a look at a lot of different areas of potential concern they've learned over many, many, many years in many, many, many different police departments, and they just don't dig it deep into things because it doesn't make sense. For example, they brought up the overtime issue, which was a good question. I mean, we have $90,000 in overtime with first response. Well, unless you're getting close to 10%, we don't really dig much deeper. And the way I look at it, I think we're right around 2.5%. So, that would be one thing that they didn't even include in the report or do a much more detailed study because it just appeared that there wasn't an issue. And I think that's one of the good things about this report is there's not a whole lot of issues that they identified, which means, things are being run fairly efficiently around here, so.
Yeah, you're right, unless there's, a red flag that says you really need to look into this, why look at something that's such a small slice?
Any other questions for Mr. Cassini? Or for Chief or Anderson? No questions?
any comment?
Questions, comment?
Oh, no, I was waiting for questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
What was the cost of the analysis?
$38,000.
30. Counselor News. Already? Goodness. I was gonna mention the open house, but you already covered that. Couple of things that I wanted to just touch base on, as just reminders of events that are coming up. One of them is, we have our first annual gala for the Sherwood Center for the Arts is on April 2nd, Saturday night. You can come as an individual or a couple, or you can purchase a table. And it'll be hopefully an annual event with food, live music, some auction items, and so I want to make sure that that's on people's calendars if they choose to attend. And of course, everything is on the city website or the Center for the Arts website. There was a 4-bill package that was passed in the Senate, and one of the bills was Senate Bill 1573. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but this is the bill that was part of a 4-bill package that was essentially targeted as affordable housing effort, I guess. Why is Senate Bill 1573 interesting to Sherwood? Well, 1573 relates to annexations inside the UGB that were regulated by voter approval. And while there aren't that many towns, there are still a number of towns in Oregon that were putting annexations to a vote of the people, and that Senate bill was signed by the governor yesterday. And so that goes into effect, which could mean a lot for Sherwood. It could mean nothing really changes, but if I was a betting person, which I'm not, there will be areas in town that will come in much sooner than they would have otherwise. If they meet the criteria, and the bill is quite small, so it's not very obvious, and I've asked our attorney to clarify. There's a term called territory. If the land is inside the UGB, if the land comes in as part of a territory, I mean, what does the word territory mean? And it was a very fast-tracked bill, but it did pass both the House and the Senate, and so I have a letter that Governor Brown sent in response to concerns about it, and just helped understand, why she signed it, essentially. And so it could be additional development, which is, of course, would be a strain or a challenge for public safety, for public works, for anything that develops in the community. And so, while we have a number of housing developments going up, we could have a lot more in a shorter period of time than we've had in the past. I mean, the last 5 years we've grown 5%. So obviously it's not the growth of, from the time when I moved here in 97, we were about 8,000. There was a 300% growth, and then we've slowed down. But this could bring a lot more property in. And if you have paid attention to the national figures, we lead the state, we lead the nation in economic growth and housing appreciation. And that, might be a factor for why these bills were put together and sent through down in Salem. But just wanted to make you aware of that. If you're interested, you can go to any of our representatives' websites, and there's a link. But again, the bill is not very long, and we're still trying to understand, what will happen, how the council will determine whether or not, the property qualifies. So that is pending out there. Are you gonna talk about the shred event?
No, go ahead.
Okay, April 23rd, there's a community shred event right here. It's a Saturday, I think it's from 10 to 2. 10 to 1, thank you. And then the weekend after that, there's a drug collection, or medication collection on Saturday as well.
Prescription drug
Yeah.
take back.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Prescription drug take back. So those will be here on Saturdays. The city is currently taking applications for the Citizens Academy class. I think when Joe gave an update on Tuesday, there were like 10 people that had signed up, so there were quite a few positions available. The council is also considering a couple of new boards and commissions that the mayor has, we talked about a little bit during our goal setting session. One of them is utility board. And we do have a number of utilities in Sherwood, and then a youth advisory board, which some communities have been doing for 20 years. And I put a plug in to the chief, since we have a vacancy. I would really like it if we, if he would, the chair would consider, a member of the youth, somebody, who's in high school. Could maybe serve for a few years and kind of give us some feedback, or give you some feedback on, what it's like to be a kid in Sherwood, with respect to some of the issues that you tackle or tackle on behalf of the council. On Tuesday night, we also had Division Chief Weiss, from TVFNR, and Captain Mark Daniel came to talk about the bond measure that will also be on the May ballot. That is an emergency,
Communications.
emergency preparedness communications. So it's a capital bond for 40. It's, pardon?
You looking for the number?
Yeah.
77.
77, sorry. I knew it was two numbers in a row. And that's a significant amount of money. But what it will do is it will basically bring the whole region together so that we're all communicating with the same radios, which are not a function of whether or not the electricity's on. And WACA, who is our Washington County dispatch organization, is basically functioning with equipment that was purchased in 1990. So this is essentially, in my opinion, a public safety bond that is on the ballot in May, and will obviously serve all of Washington County, and basically allow all the agencies, fire, police, safety, EMS, to communicate with the same standard of equipment. And so that's pending. I'm sure you'll probably see some flyers in the mail. There was a handout that they brought. We also had, obviously TVFNR is, helping to support this in an informational campaign, and just to get some information out to voters. So I know we have some pamphlets at City Hall. So I think that's all I have. Other than I attended on behalf of Councilor Kuiper the Parks Board and Cedar Creek Trail, which will be an interesting policing environment when it gets done. Is a few months behind schedule, but is moving forward, and just waiting for a piece of property that the Urban Renewal District has up for sale and finishing the final designs. So, any questions for me?
Yep.
And budget.
Yep.
Hold on. And obviously staff's in the middle of budget. We start budget meetings in May.
There was, if you mentioned it, I didn't hear it, the suicide prevention.
Oh, yes. I have that down here. May 19th. There's it's a, sort of, I mean, it's prevention obviously, but a lot of it has to do with education and awareness. If you meet somebody and know somebody who's exhibiting some of the signs of distress, physical or mental, and so that's being offered, which is pretty, which is unique in the county based on what we've been told by Washington County and their mental health team. And it's actually a program through the library, but May 19th.
A quick question, you said the budget discussions are starting in May?
The budget meetings
Okay.
begin in May, so
How
right.
does that mesh with the police study report and implementation guide schedules?
I don't know, it'll really depend on which options and such they choose and when they try to prepare those off, but my guess is probably not. I mean, there's probably a lot more discussions that need to happen in the community before you decide to go down the path, especially one of the major recommendations. It's not gonna match up with the budget. I mean, staff already put together a budget and they're just assembling it now, and so it's quite a process. I don't know, I can't say for certain, but it doesn't seem to me like it would probably be happening in the budget process, but certainly the budget's gonna be changed as the year goes along and as more information comes available.
Pretty tight timeline.
Yeah, and implementations of this, I mean, the
Yeah,
recommendations that they
it's-
have, you don't just flip that
I mean,
switch, so.
as Counselor Henderson pointed out, the report was released Friday, so I mean, and all of our numbers were due Friday.
Yeah.
So the initial numbers have been completed and at the same time the report came out, so it's clearly not something that is rushed down the tracks. I mean, it's just not, so it can't be.
I'd like to understand the annexation issue a little bit more, so,
Wouldn't we all?
so it was signed,
Signed by the governor.
now, so explain to me, so we've got housing that's outside the, explain to me what this means.
Can I make a suggestion? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I would respectfully
would you please
defer
come
to
back up?
Tom again
Alright.
because he
Sorry,
knows.
Tom.
You thought you were done.
Your
Yeah.
corned beef and my corned beef are gonna have to wait.
I can see that. So I guess, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's kind of a very unusual bill that the legislature passed. They typically don't assert local control and home rule authority, and in this particular case, as a part of what they felt was important, at least is what the governor said, and I think was expressed by others, they are looking for ways to try to deal with the rapidly increasing housing rates in the metropolitan area.
Cost of housing.
Yeah, cost of housing. And so, one of the things they did along with a number of things was to try to expand the available land for housing. And they felt, I don't think we agreed, but they felt that passing a bill that would try to speed that process up by not allowing annexations to go to the voters was a good idea. Unfortunately, it does take away a lot of power from the citizens, for sure, because they're not allowed to vote on annexations anymore, as long as they meet the criteria, and the criteria aren't very high. It's all the property owners of the area that wants to be annexed. It's a property that's contiguous to another property in the city.
Only separated by a public right of way.
Or, and then there's one other criteria, and then, finally, it talks about, other council or other city, ordinances, which we don't have any ordinances on annexation, and there's really not a whole lot you can do. So, we're gonna have to kind of figure this out together, but honestly, the legislature just basically said, if you're inside the urban growth boundary and you wanna be annexed, we're gonna create a very, very, very low bar and take away local authority, and that's, why I believe Morgan City is opposed to it. That's why, number of our counselors lobbied against it. That's why, representatives in the area said no, but unfortunately it passed, the Senate passed the House in the first session, and the governor signed it, so.
So how long does it take a homeowner who is not currently annexed to go through the process to be annexed?
Well, before, there's 4 different ways that people can be annexed into the city. The last 2 that we had were the majority of the property owners, with the majority of the assessed value, making an application and assigning it, getting it authorized by the county, and then submitting it to the city. The city council went through a process to decide whether to refer that to the voters or not, and then the voters would ultimately decide. Now, it would look like if you have 100% of an area
part of the
Annexation, but it could be
application.
one property, so, you know.
Yeah, nobody's forced to annex.
Right, so if they're not annexed, are they using Sherwood city services?
Not currently, and not under the new law either, just because we can't extend our services outside the city boundaries. There is an exception to that, which is buried in the law, which we haven't figured out, and that is if you are a property that is not inside the urban growth boundary, but your property is necessary to provide urban services, then you can become party annexation request as well, which would be really odd if someone who's not even inside the urban growth boundary can now be annexed into a city just because they can provide services. But we have some of those areas out on Brookman where the sanitary sewer line is going outside the urban growth boundary back in, so, yeah, it's gonna be fun. We're gonna all learn a lot here.
Okay, so you just said something that confused me a little bit, so I
Sure.
just wanna make sure that I understand.
Yeah.
So if they get annexed in, they're
Mhm.
still not necessarily going to be part of Sherwood services?
Well, they would become a part of the city, since we have concept planned, you know, the areas that we're talking about. The zoning that is in the concept plan would become applied to their property, and then they could go through the regular process like anybody else would, to, a site plan or subdivision or whatever, in order to develop their property to those urban densities. I suppose if you were a house who annexed into the city and you just wanted to hook up to sewer and you couldn't previously, that limitation would be lifted and you could. So, but you couldn't develop to the densities unless you went through the planning process in order to get there.
I'm just gonna, I'm
I'm
gonna
sorry.
make this, no, you're saying what you need to say, I'm being dense.
No,
So I'm just gonna, how many more people are going to need police services?
well,
And how quickly?
yeah.
Because really what I'm getting to is the survey valid if this is all happening now?
Yeah. So I guess a couple of things. First off, well, certainly there's a, you know, if you're starting to go through a land use process, let's say somebody annexes into the city in the next 6 months, you know, it's usually a year and a half before you actually have any occupancy, more like 2 years. You get through the whole land consolidation process, through the land use process, through the construction process, because, you know, subdivisions in particular have to build roads and streets and sanitary. So we'll have information. I asked Greg that question, and he said that he was not worried about those levels of changes in significantly changing the police services in the city. So that was certainly something that we asked him. I specifically asked him about Brooklyn and those areas, and he didn't feel like there was a need to look further into the study to figure out whether or not it was going to still be accurate with those additional reference. So.
And can I ask a follow-up to the chief? Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, there's not a, there's not a section of land or potential development that is so large that it would be, holy smokes. I would draw as a comparison I think what's called River's Edge in Tigard.
River Terrace.
River Terrace, thank you. That's a huge, expansive development. Or even if we looked at Sherwood West and we said, hey, we're looking at Sherwood West building out in the next 3 years, I'd be like, I think everybody'd be like, But when we're talking about areas like the Brookman area, you know, it's, no, we're not. You know, will it have an impact? Yeah, it'll have an impact, but certainly not something that would cause me any grave concern. I mean, we would just have to, address that and go ahead. But what you have to keep in mind, and I'll be more specific reference to the study, is that, we're not behind. I mean, the study showed that. Anecdotally, I told Greg that before the study started. I said, I know what the data's gonna show. We're not behind. That's not the issue. So, because of that, we're in a very good position. So, when you talk about something like Brookman, it's not, let me back up. In patrol, in our ability to respond to residential needs and so that's, when you talk about an area like Brookman, that's not a concern. Another little factoid for you, when it comes to public safety, specifically law enforcement services, residential is is fairly low on the demand list. So there's other types of development that have far greater impacts on law enforcement than residential does. I mean, that's just the reality.
Thank you.
Sure.
Again, sorry.
I'm right here, I'll stay here.
Yeah, Linda, you mentioned the Citizens Academy, and I think there was something in the Archer about it, I'm not sure about that. But I haven't seen any publicity about it and so forth. And I've asked several people if they even knew anything about it. In my neighborhood, they haven't. So it might be prudent to, if they want more people in it, to get the word out. I don't know who's supposed to get the word out, but people don't know anything about it.
Anything on social media or the app or anything about it yet?
Yeah, I thought I saw it on social, well, I know I saw it on social media, and I thought the Gazette ran something on it, but I could be wrong on that, but, so, clearly, the city is gonna continue to advertise, to get the word out, so there's no worry on that end, that will happen, so.
I think the target was a class of 20,
18,
pardon?
18 people.
Okay, 18 people. So, you know, they're about halfway to their goal, I think, the
And-
first time. And I think once people take it, they'll, you know, more people will be through word of mouth and, the opportunity to, you know, get informed through that. But that would be a question for Joe. I know I've seen it, on social media, but I don't remember, nothing's in the Archer that I just looked at. So we might need to do a little bit more promotion and advertising.
And did I hear at the council meeting that there were a couple of spots reserved for high school age participants too? Or is that something different?
I have not heard that.
Okay. That must have been something
I
different.
mean, I think it's open to, I think there's a minimum age requirement, but I don't remember what it was. I think that's probably 16 maybe.
Okay.
But, I don't recall off the top of my head, so.
Any other questions or comments?
Staff reports.
Thank you. Very brief, but before I get started, we have somebody here that I wanna introduce, and I asked for permission before, but he said that was okay. So, while we certainly appreciate everybody attending, I wanna, introduce and thank Dean Gooding, joined us tonight, and, he, if you recognize the name, he is the father of Sergeant Jason Gooding, who we lost, I'm sorry, I don't remember the date, but several weeks ago.
February 5th.
Yes.
Friday, February 5th.
Yes. So, as I have already, thank you, sir, for joining us tonight, and we all thank you for you and your family sacrifice as well. So just a brief update, we've talked about community policing training. You all expressed an interest in having some of that, whatever that looked like specifically. So, Mr. Brian Kaufman, who is the director of the Western Regional Community Policing Institute, which, as I said before, we are very fortunate to have located in Oregon. And so it's a regional center. There's, I can't remember, there's several throughout the nation. And so we have one in our backyard. And so he is, we have communicated, and he is planning to come to the April meeting. He could not come tonight because of another commitment, but he will be in the April meeting, so he and I will work together along with your chair and vice chair about the length and depth of what he presents. I would ask one thing, if you have specific questions, there is all kind, if you Google community policing, you will get all kinds of hits, and if you want to do, including most of which will lead you to the COPS office, the main page. So if you want to do a little bit of research and maybe come up with a couple of specific questions or topics, feel free to email them to staff, and we'll have him prepared to talk about that. And then we will also be working with him to do some stuff with the police department here as well, some enhanced training on our community policing efforts. As you know, this is all a follow-up to our attending the training, and it of course is coincidentally mentioned in the study, which is good as well, so. I think, unless there's any other questions, that's all
Chief, can you give an
Oh.
update on the disaster preparedness?
It's not all I've got. Yes, I will.
That's right.
I wrote 2 things down and then I didn't say them. Shocking. So we had 85 people attend our community preparedness workshop. It was amazing attendance. It was very, very well received. Anybody with us tonight that attended? As I thought, yeah. So, they can tell me I'm wrong, but the feedback I've gotten is that it was wonderful and, like I said, very well received. So it was video recorded, and the video and the materials can be found on the emergency management page and in the city website. And the video is in its raw format. Eventually, it will be edited to be cleaned up, and the PowerPoint will be incorporated so that it'll refer to the PowerPoint. So if folks want to go back and rehash it, they can. If they want to look at the handouts. We will also be scheduling a repeat version here again. There's been several folks that said they missed it and they want to see it. So I would certainly recommend for anybody that might be watching this meeting that while you can certainly look on the website, the best experience is going to be to attend the next workshop if you missed the first one. You will leave with a handful of resources and tools to help you get you and your family, your pets, extended family, whoever prepared in the event of a disaster or emergency. So, does that cover what you were looking for?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's very, very good. It's about an hour and a half. So, I wasn't there because it was a school board meeting, and so I will have to myself join the folks at the next one. A couple more calendar items. On May 14th, we have just scheduled our first Tip-A-Cop for the year. So that'll be on Saturday, May 14th. It'll be a breakfast and lunch Tip-A-Cop at Rose's Restaurant and Deli. So if you want to mark that down. And then the other May calendar item I will share with you is on Saturday, the following week, Saturday, May 21st, is the annual Community Services Fair that is held at Station 33, our 12 Valley Fire and Rescue Station here in town. So there you go.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Questions? No? Citizen comments, thank you, Chief. Citizen comments?
Tony Bell, Southwest Lynn, just around the corner, lived in Sherwood 17 years. Happy St. Patrick's Day, hope you get a chance. Philosophically, this amendment, this 1573, it really, smacks the citizens in Sherwood in the face. 3 times voted down annexation. 3 times whoever had the opportunity to present valid arguments for it. Didn't happen 3 times. We have some pretty smart citizens in Sherwood, I think. At least that's what they put in the paper. We asked for citizen participation. I mean, if you get it, then the people who do show up, they're slapped in the face and said, hey, it doesn't matter what you think. 3 times that's happened. Another, for instance, the chicken thing and the chicken survey. I hope you know something about that. Over 500 respondents for it, and then it was kicked down the road. Again, the citizens ignored. Doesn't matter. Again, getting back. We asked for citizen participation. When you get it, the citizen participation doesn't count because the big boys, big girls, they're going to make the decision for us. I hope Josh, our city attorney, I hope the League of Women Voters, I hope they get on on this thing, and if there is any way, with 23 other cities in Oregon that require citizen approval of annexation, I hope they get on our state government. I emailed all of those people on there against this 1573, so hopefully I'm preaching to the choir, but I mean, we just can't let this be the way it is. Citizens ignored. My second comment on the recreational marijuana thing, it is a thing. When it all comes down to the bitter end in November, it's gonna be an emotional vote. I don't think it's gonna be a rational vote. I mean, hey, we grew up with reefer madness, and we still have that in our heads. And I don't know how you inform citizens about it, because the workshop last week, I was there. I mean, it was pretty sparse. So what I'm saying is, this vote is not going to come down to an educated vote. It's going to come down to an emotional vote. If it comes down to an educated vote, we're going to have to get more people into these workshops, whether they're for it or against it. Present the arguments for and against, rather than, we look for information that validates our thinking. We're all like that. But, hopefully we're smart people, and if it's presented correctly, that we can make a valid vote, a good vote. So, yeah, I'm kind of disheartened, but hey, we'll move on this. Thank you.
Pardon? It sounds like my alarm clock. Any other citizen comment?